Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, February 24th, if you were just tuning in. We just finished going over what a perfect offseason might look like for the San Francisco 49ers. In this segment, we take a look at what the MLB season might have in store for the Seattle Mariners, a team that struggled especially offensively last season. We'll talk about what they did in the offseason to get better and if they'll improve or not. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, February 24th. But like I was saying, we're going to get into a little bit of the Mariners offseason. The Mariners had an interesting year last season because they were expected to make it back to the playoffs after making it a couple seasons ago. They finished 85-77, good for second in the AL West and missing the playoffs. This was also a team that had and arguably still has the best pitching staff in the league. Now, the issue with this Mariners team last year is they could not hit the ball. Julio Rodriguez, their young superstar who they gave a massive contract to, took a downturn last season. He was in MVP conversations at the beginning of the year last year. Just about this time, we were having conversations about Julio Rodriguez potentially winning an MVP. And he's a guy that still can do that, but his bat did not exist to the level that it needed to last season. Now, the Mariners did not do anything this offseason. They signed Rowdy Tellez to a minor league deal. They brought in Donovan Solano on a 1-year, $3.5 million deal and re-signed Jorge Polanco on a 1-year, $7 million deal. They also didn't lose too much either. They lose a couple of back-end bullpen arms, a couple of guys that were some depth for them on the bench. Austin Voth, Sam Haggerty, Josh Rojas, Justin Turner, Yimi Garcia, Luis Urias, right? These are guys that weren't exactly number one contributors to them last season, but they are pretty solid depth pieces for a team that needed them. Now we're talking about pitching, and that is the strength of this team. You talk about a team that 1 to 5 in their projected starting pitching rotation is crazy, and even when you get to the injuries, 1 to 6 would be crazy. You have Logan Gilbert, Luis Castillo, George Kirby, Bryce Miller, Brian Wu, and Matt Brash when he comes back off of injury. That is the best pitching. That's the best starting pitching rotation in all of Major League Baseball by a million years. Bryce Wu, their number 5, should be a number 2 on just about any other team. But of course, like we said, that was not the issue with this team last year. The pitching was always amazing. The issue is they couldn't get any run support. They couldn't get any runs to support the amazing pitching staff. There's a couple things that they need to figure out this season, especially at the second base position. The second base position is up for grabs. The Mariners, for a while, really have had trouble filling that hole at second base. Dylan Moore, the incumbent, the guy who played second base 135 games for them last season, is the front runner to take it. And when you take a look at Fangraphs, they're projecting him to be the lead second baseman. But there's a couple guys that could go and take his spot, especially Cole Young, the 49th ranked prospect by MLB Pipeline. Second base prospect, if he has a good spring, could come up and take that spot from Dylan Moore. Dylan Moore, not necessarily the greatest player in Seattle for the Seattle Mariners. He's a guy that by Fangraphs is projected to hit at the bottom of the order, hit 9th, but there's a couple other guys that could take it as well. Ryan Bliss, Leo Rivas. Rivas is more of a utility guy who can play shortstop and third base. He might just stay on the roster as some extra depth in the infield. Ryan Bliss is an interesting one. He's not necessarily the favorite. He doesn't have the best defense, and he strikes out a lot. But if he has a good spring, again, he could take over that second base spot. But right now, I think what this really comes down to is between Dylan Moore and Cole Young. Again, Cole Young, the 49th ranked prospect by MLB Pipeline, if he can come up and he can show that he's ready to play at the major league level, I think the Mariners might come in and give him that shot at second base. Dylan Moore probably stays roster as a backup, but still, Cole Young is someone to watch in the spring. There's a couple questions around the DH position as well. Mitch Haniger, the fourth outfield for them, was taking over that role last season, but Mitch Garver, their backup catcher, had played really good at the plate. So maybe he gets a couple of at-bats at the DH spot, but you can rotate them. That one's not that big of a deal. When we take a look at this lineup, this is where the Mariners need to really improve. And they didn't do too much to change it, but that's not the worst thing in the world. They have Victor Robles leading off projected. Victor Robles, of course, who came over from the Washington Nationals, was supposed to be this elite prospect, never really developed down in Washington. But once he came over to Seattle, maybe it was the change of scenery, he started raking. He started hitting the ball, playing great defense. You have him in right field. He is a guy that if he can continue his pace from last season is going to be a great add to this team. Julio Rodriguez, we talked about him a little bit in center. He's someone that has the ability to play at MVP level. Cal Raleigh, he is their catcher. He's someone that's arguably the best catcher in all of baseball. There's a lot of really good catchers in baseball right now. Cal Raleigh hitting third, pretty good. Then you have Randy Arozarena. And Arozarena was a trade deadline acquisition. He only played half the season. They're counting on a full season of him to really turn around that batting order. He's someone that has a bat that can be extremely productive. Maybe that's the big piece that's going to turn this team around. At first base, they have Luke Raley or Donovan Solano. Not the most exciting thing. DH, we talked about either Mitch Haniger or Mitch Garver. And then at shortstop, J.P. Crawford. Solid defender, a contact hitter, a little bit of speed there at the bottom of the lineup. I like third base, Jorge Polanco. And second base, again, not sure. Dylan Moore, potentially Cole Young, potentially Leo Rivas. There's a big fight over there at second base. But this is a lineup that if they're able to get production that they were expecting at the beginning of last season out of Julio Rodriguez, the production that they got out of Victor Robles this season, if they're able to get a full year of good Randy Arozarena, this is a top 4, a top 5, a pretty good lineup in all of baseball, right? This is a team that won 80-plus games last season despite having a really bad offense, and that is a lot to do because of that pitching rotation. But it's not just the rotation that we went over of Gilbert, Castillo, Kirby, Miller, and Wu, but also the bullpen. Andres Munoz, one of the best closers in all of baseball. Some pretty great setup guys in the back end as well, in Cole Snyder and Gregory Santos. This is a really good Mariners squad. They're over-under set at 84.5 wins this season. I think they get a resurgent year. I think they find a way to sneak in as a wild card team, still finish second in the AL West. But I do think that this is a year where we get a little bit better out of Julio Rodriguez, a Julio Rodriguez that could return to potentially MVP form. This is a team that I think wins 87 to 90 games and finds their way back into the playoffs, second place in the division to the Texas Rangers. But let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear them. What do you think this Seattle Mariners team looks like this season? I'd love to hear. But thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We'll be back tomorrow, continuing our series of MLB and NFL offseason stuff. The NFL Combine is this week. We'll do a little bit of preview for that, as well as anything else that happens from around the world of sports tonight. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to